two microphones are up. I'll do with one at a time. Kia ora koutou, good morning everybody. We'll start the meeting with our usual karakia. Whakatakatahau ki te uru, whakatahau ki te tonga, kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki e he ana ti atakura, he tio, he huka, ti hei, kia ora, ka pai, kia ora. Thank you everybody, and to councillors and to members of the public, welcome to the very first meeting of the council in this new council chamber and our new premises for the time being. Before I just make a few comments on that, just be aware for the purposes of this meeting only, we have a photographer who's going to be taking photos, I think principally of councillors, live action shots I think they call them, although they're stills. So we'll be roving around a bit. They have my permission to do that, so but the photographer will be suitably discreet and well behaved. The other thing, which is now a permanent feature of meeting in this council chamber, is that the public gallery is visible on the live stream. So members of the public who don't wish to be picked up by the live stream will have to sit in probably one of the farthest corners of the room, but when members of the public are speaking during public participation, the live stream will pick up members in the gallery, so just be aware of that. That may be welcome to some, it may not be. So as I've indicated, this is our first meeting in this, our new premises, Te Aho Tupua. The name Te Aho Tupua has been gifted to us by Te Atiawa through our Tākaiheri partnership. And the name speaks to the ties between people, place and the natural world. And you'll see on the wall there a depiction of Te Whanganiuatara, the harbour, and various important locations, historical locations that are part of the Wellington landscape. The part of the design of the building is to ensure that public access is a little easier. There are public-facing spaces on the lower levels and in the council chamber, and we have other public spaces on this level here as well. And that's about making this a facility that is easier for residents and ratepayers of Wellington to engage with the council and their councillors, consistent with our democratic obligations. Can I just say to those the council officers who've been responsible for the project, because it has been a lengthy one, it's been approved by previous councils, but actually pulling off a project like this and seeing a shift of an organisation like the City Council from one, or set of premises actually, but principally the terrace, down to a new building is a big undertaking. And I just want to acknowledge the reasonably seamless way in which that has happened, but also to acknowledge the facilities, the quality of the facilities that are here, those public spaces, and thank all those involved in it and those who have led it, most recently Karepa Wall, who assisted in that leadership. So, and I should acknowledge too, the 30th of April is a significant date for a whole bunch of reasons historically. In our kind of world history, it was the date of the Louisiana Purchase by the United States. It was the date that electrons were announced as having been discovered. Don't ask me the years that these happened in. It was the day that the first version of the Land Rover was exhibited. It marked the end of the Vietnam War when Saigon fell, and it was when the World Wide Web was launched in 1993. I remember the 30th of April because it was the day that the very first March on Parliament that I organised took place. I remember it well. Anyway, let's get into the agenda. Are there any apologies? None have been notified. Orders?
Just for early departure if we don't finish by 11:45.
There'll be something seriously wrong if we haven't finished by 11:45. But that might be in all our hands, Councillor Rogers. All right, I'll note that apology. Well, I guess we have to move that, so I will move that. Seconder is Ben, Councillor Deputy Mayor McNulty. We'll vote on that. Voting system is working. Oh, it's there, right, okay. Councillor Compton, Councillor Randall. You got your device, Councillor Compton? Yeah. That's all right. That's accepted. Thank you. Any announcements I have to make will be in the course of the report backs that we've got, so nothing there. Are there any conflicts of interest that members wish to declare, given the items on the agenda? There are none. Turn to the minutes. This is approving the minutes of the last council meeting on the 26th of March 2026. They've been circulated. I move that they be approved and be taken as read and confirmed as a true and accurate record of that meeting. Have a seconder for that? Councillor Al-Rubai. I'll put that motion. Councillor Randall. Oh, there we go. That's approved. Thank you. All right. There are no items not on the agenda. We have 3 participants in the public participation section, and I now call on Darren Young, who's going to speak in relation to the oral update on the 20 April weather event. Darren.
Mayor Little, councillors and Pauiui. My name's Darren Young. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in today's meeting. I'm speaking about my own oral update about this weather event. I live in Vogeltown. At 3:30 approximately AM, I knew we were in trouble, and at 3:43 we rang 111 to evacuate. They did not come. We got a phone call at 6 AM from 105 asking if we still needed help. By that stage, obviously the worst of it was over. We've got substantial damage to our property, and we're one of the many that are homeless as a result of the weather event. We've been lucky, and I'd like to start with thanks. I think on day 4, because every day is a day. Today's day 11 for me, because it's non-stop cleanup. Day 4, I contacted Councillor Foon and Councillor Chung, and they rang me back within 5 minutes, and which was fantastic response. And I sort of enlightened them on what the information I need to know, which is going to talk about in the photo. And I needed someone from council to come around, because there wasn't just the risk from this event, but a future event, because I knew what the forecast was. And we got some council officers around that day. That was day 4. That would have been, last Thursday. They were from, I think, the housing team, and they were looking at, they red stickered the house that was on the news last night. That's our street, Leardit Street in Vogeltown. And then they came down to our place to look at the destruction. I didn't know what business department they were from, but basically to show them where the water came from and the risks to life that was ongoing for us at that stage. Unbeknown to me, and I still haven't been told officially from Council or Wellington Water, on day 3 I went up in the catchment area above us, and I'm not sure how many 100 metres of sewer pipe had been taken out, but that all flowed through our property, and no one's told us that it was contaminated. And that flowed through to our property, obviously, at the bottom of the hill. And in that picture, if you see the red roof at the bottom of the picture, that's my garage roof. And what's come down the catchment is the top of the photograph, down a gully, basically, which is an open trench down to a culvert. And when I went up on day 1 to that property, which is 36 McColl Street, where the culvert's located, that was, you could only see about 2 inches of the top of the digger driver's cover, and it was like a riverbed basically, and so the culvert was covered. Luckily, we haven't had any rain for the last 7 days or so. The culvert's still not back in its working state. I had a phone call about 8:05 this morning, and that's why I left my notes all at home, because I was trying to get my autistic son out the door, who's not doing too good. But basically, to say that the culvert, which I already knew about, that was the resolutions team at Wellington Water, and that's another issue, because they basically, on day 4, I rang them when I rang Laurie and Ray, and they automatic email came back and basically says you get a reply within 3 days. Well, I didn't get any reply until this morning, which is 7 days. So they've got their issues with their comms, and he's only the comm person. So there's a large slip basically in that catchment above us. I asked Laurie to get someone senior at council, because that's council reserve. That's blocking this natural stream, as you like, which is basically an open trench. Until that's dealt with, we can't get our work to our house reinstated. And I've only got 6 months cover for accommodation benefit on our insurance policy. It's very steep on the sides and very steep. If you ever want to come and get some exercise and walk up there with me, I'm quite happy to show you. I tried to get in there at the weekend, but don't ever wear gumboots with no socks on in water, because luckily I'm not infected, but I've got sores and I'm going to lose toenails, etc. But in a weather event, don't ever do that, because it makes life a lot more difficult. So what we need is clarity from council to know what's happening with that slip, because until that's gone, that could be brought down in the next weather event, flood that culvert again, which is going to be cleared today, and then the water comes back down to our place. And if the sewer is only temporary and we're nearly in winter, that could come down again as well. And that's all I've got to talk about today. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you for that. And just know that our thoughts and considerations for you and your family. We know that this is ongoing for you. You've got a really challenging period ahead, and you'll have our support. You've raised a critical point here, so I'll follow that up, and I know councillors Foon and Chung will make sure that that is followed up. We want to give as much support as we can to enable you and your family to get through what is a very difficult recovery period. So thank you for bringing that to our attention this morning.
Thank you.
Can I ask Stu Farrant to speak? Stu is online. Stu.
Yeah, kia ora, good morning. Can everybody hear me okay, firstly?
Yep, we can hear you loud and clear.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just in the car out at a site visit. Firstly, that was really harrowing to hear, Darren, and I really sort of feel for the trauma that you've gone through. So I'm Stu Farrant. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm an ecological engineer who's been very active in the area of sort of urban stormwater management and in particular urban streams across Pōneke for many years. Born and bred up in the Waitohi catchment in the Northern Hills there. And so I just wanted to take this opportunity. I'm not too sure whether anyone, probably due to timing, didn't hear Craig McElroy was on RNZ just as I was driving to site this morning. He's head of Healthy Waters and Flood Resilience at Auckland Council, and I'd implore everybody to seek that out on 9 to noon and listen to that after this. So the storms that were seen across the hills in the southern suburbs Monday a week ago were neither unexpected or uncharacteristic. Whilst the intensity of the rainfall was significant, it was fortunately reasonably localised, and its relatively short duration enabled floodwaters to recede relatively quickly. The scale, location, and consequence of the flooding experienced was consistent with model predictions. Whilst the event has been extremely distressing for many, we are fortunate that it is not more widespread and did not have the extreme rainfall depths which are increasingly seen in other centres around New Zealand. Whilst the 77 mils reported in an hour, it was actually greater than that if you sort of look at 3:15 to 4:15. It was really just a 1 hour event with heavy rain either side, but not the depths that we see in Auckland and Tasman and places like that. Similar or worse events can be expected in the coming years or sooner, in catchments, including Waimapihi, Waitangi, Kumatoto, Waikoko, which will force water into the economic heart of the city. How our city responds to these types of deluges is totally tied to the decisions that the city made 150 years ago when we started a campaign of piping almost all of our once free-flowing waterways. Excess surface water is now unable to fit into the pipe streams, which were never designed to accommodate peak flows. There is now no alternative than to flow overland as seen last Monday. As we saw on Monday, water does not respect property boundaries, but will always take the easiest route to the coastline. Where the overland flow is obstructed by buildings, filled land, fences, or raised roads, deep ponding will occur with the risk to property and life. The financial costs, emotional trauma, and disruption of these uncontrolled flows are substantial and unsustainable. And I think Darren's reflections really speak to that. This event also occurred at an interesting time, with only 8 weeks until Te Aki Wai is stood up. Whilst Te Aki Wai will assume the key task of managing stormwater in an integrated catchment manner, it will be fundamental to work closely with Wellington City Council around how the city meets community and iwi aspirations for improved water quality and flood resilience. Critically, Te Aki Wai will not be responsible for managing stormwater from the road corridor, and will need to work closely with Wellington City Council roading teams about how overland flow paths along many road alignments can be better accommodated to reduce impacts. Given that many roads, such as Aro Valley, Adelaide Road, Kent and Cambridge Terrace, and the Parade, are built directly above streams, these roads will always form vital overland flow paths through the city. Other sag points where pipe streams cross beneath roads will remain key locations for flood resilience planning, and it was at many of these sag points that we saw the floodwaters which severely impacted houses in the likes of Herald Street and Emerson Street. Therefore, whilst Te Aki Wai will be expected to do the heavy lifting with future stormwater management, Wellington City Council will still need to invest carefully in collaborative planning and co-design for the better management of roading and development to ensure that future rainfall is less impactful to businesses, dwellings, and community facilities. Planning for what are commonly called blue-green networks, which is seen in Auckland, Hamilton, and internationally, needs to be seen as an opportunity to support multiple well-beings and proactively plan for future rainfall events, which we know are inevitable. And again, I'll just implore you to go back and listen to Craig's discussion around their $750 million program on blue-green networks. All new developments, be they council or private, must move our city towards a more resilient and regenerative future. This will require Wellington City Council to work constructively with Te Aki Wai and communities around policy, building consents and controls, and education to ensure that future development projects do not contribute to worsening flood and environmental outcomes. Again, this will not be a straightforward task given deficiencies in the Building Act, existing national, regional, and local policy, and the current disconnect between communities and the catchments in which they live. The sort of the feedback that's come out of the floods last Monday is a sense of unexpectedness and alarm. But as I said, these were not unforeseen, and we just need to ensure that the city prepares in the future. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Stu. That's incredibly helpful analysis and summary for us. We do have a few minutes left. Do any councillors have any questions for Stu? Councillor Calvert.
Hi, Stu. Thank you for your presentation. So if you were the council, what would be the first thing that you, following the events last week, and I know we've got a lot of information already, but what would be the first step that you would do?
I guess the first step is obviously recovery, which you're obviously doing a great job of now. But then really making some of those hard decisions around where water will go next time. We know where water went this time, and it was through properties and businesses and the likes. And then use that, I guess, to inform. And I know you have a process on looking at those catchments at the moment. So just supporting that process, I guess, and really making some sort of hard decisions around what the future use of public space might be, what the future sort of levels of service for roading might be, and just really how water can move through a catchment from the top to the bottom in a way that enables recovery to happen in a short time frame rather than, when Darren talks about 6 months, insurance cover for being out of a home, that's incredibly stressful when we can, we saw the floodwaters receded in sort of a matter of hours sort of thing. So how can we walk away from these events with a memory and not a trauma?
Thank you.
Any other questions for Stu? If there are none, thank you very much, Stu, and your point about that need for good integration between Wellington City Council and Te Ake Wai is, I think, when it comes to stormwater, is first and foremost priority for us. So really appreciate your comments on that. That's been very helpful.
Yeah, all the best.
Thank you. And we have Steve Walters speaking on behalf of Destination KRL.
Matt and council staff, thank you for enabling us to speak today. Hopefully we will have a presentation. Do I need to press anything for the presentation to come up? Or, oh, here we go. Thank you. So we're here today to talk about the Moa Point Business Support Grant. We'll all be aware of the issues we've got at Moa Point. We've got 10 slides I'd like to hopefully go through. I fully understand the technical issues given the first meeting in the new building. Firstly, I just want to say thank you for considering providing a business grant that is much needed and will totally be well used for businesses that are really struggling on the South Coast. So my first and one of my biggest messages is thank you for enabling this grant. There's a few things I'm going to talk about. Currently what's happening, I'll go through that. I'm going to hand over to Hugh Collins, who's the owner of Ocean Hunter, a dive shop in Lyle Bay, to talk firsthand about what he's been going through since the Moa Point plant failed in February. I'll talk about business feedback that we have based on the grant that is proposed, and I've got some proposed next steps. So let's fly into our current situation. I'm pressing my clicker, but if you have to do it manually, that's fine. Even if I just say when to flip to the next one, that will totally work. Right, current situation. Council-controlled infrastructure failed 4 February. We've had over 6 billion litres of untreated sewage discharged into Wellington South Coast. We don't know when this is going to end. That's a lot of sewage pumped into one of the jewels of Wellington. The impact has been a massive drop in visitation to many areas of the South Coast, especially the commercial area in Lyle Bay. Many businesses in Lyle Bay and Kabuni, Arongatai, have been impacted. We are just talking today about the 25 most impacted businesses, and for a lot of them, this is a matter of survival. We know the discharge is continuing through both the long and short outfall pipes, which has major implications on people wanting to come and use the beach and get in the water. And as of yet, we have not received 3 months after the date any news or information that we can tell the businesses how long they need to plan for, because we don't know how long this is going on. So it's a pretty bleak situation that we have at the moment. Can we go to the next slide, please? It's a really tough business environment. Before this happened, businesses struggled with COVID. We've had a global economic downturn. Wellington lost a lot of public service people, therefore a lot of spend in our city. We've now got negative population growth, negative economic growth in our city, and lately we've now got a Middle East conflict which is causing more woe. The result is over the last few years, businesses have not been going as well as they would like or they should be going in Wellington. We know that costs for business are compounding a lot more than revenue is. Over the last 5 years, electricity's gone up 30 to 60%, insurance is up 50 to 100%, Wellington City Council rates have gone up 60 to 80%, remembering, of course, that businesses pay 3.7 times the amount that residential businesses pay, one of the highest commercial differentials in the country. Greater Wellington Regional Council rates up 80 to 110%. That's what's happened in the last 5 years. That's what businesses are facing. Looking forward for the next 5 years, council rates are going up 45 to 70%, regional council rates going up another 70 to 100%. On top of that now, we've got Te Ake Wai projecting their water charges for business are going to go up 50 to 100%. The CPI inflation expectation for the next 5 years is 10 to 13%. Costs are going up way more than inflation. So businesses are sustaining increased cost after increased costs. And it's a weight that they are really struggling to bear. Now, on top of that, can we go to the next slide, please? We've had Moa Point hit Lyall Bay businesses. I've got the stormy clouds over Lyall Bay there. We know that business costs are rising faster than business revenue. The business costs are compounding. When you put a cost up 10% one year, it doesn't reduce the next year for the 15% increase next year. You're putting 15% on top of 10%. So these costs are compounding for businesses. The Moa Point plant failure, it's a nightmare on top of a really tough period for businesses that should never have happened. I think we can all agree that. The reality is many Lyall Bay businesses can't sustain the losses from Moa Point on top of everything else. Let's go to the next slide. They do need support to continue. Looking particularly at the Lyall Bay impact. So we know visitation's down. 25 businesses who are acutely affected have lost 25 to 70%. Now, a lot of these businesses rely on peak summer trade. We're a beach zone. People come to the beach for summer to be close to or in the water. If they can't come, they don't do the spend. And that's when a lot of our businesses need to make their money for the rest of the year. Now, these businesses, they're not high margin businesses. They might be making 5, 10% on margin profit on their total revenue. So to suddenly lose 25, 30, 40% is a massive cost. If I've 30% down in my business and I'm making 15% margin, it's going to take me twice the amount of time to recoup that money than the duration of that loss. So the margins are small, the losses have big impact. Each week, we know businesses have lost in total, just these 25 businesses, about $120,000. So we're anticipating, hoping the plant is back up and running by spring 1 September. I'm going to hand over to Hugh to talk about the impact that he's had from his own personal experience.
Here today.
Yep.
And would really like to extend thanks on behalf of businesses that you're actually here today considering this. My business specialises in sort of mainly the retail of spearfishing, freediving, scuba diving, snorkeling equipment. We also teach sort of freediving courses with the aim to basically keep people safe in the water. We have, like Steve has said, been impacted quite severely from this event. Our business is very seasonal, so for this to happen in sort of the key summer months has been a disaster for us. We rely on that business through sort of the summer months to get us through the winter months. Steve can talk about more on the sort of business side of things, but I just wanted to touch on sort of maybe a bit more like personal sort of side of things. You know, like for myself and my business partner, we're in a position where we're reducing sort of our own personal incomes to keep our staff employed. But we can't keep doing that. You know, like I've got a newborn son, he's 5 weeks old. I can't support my family if this continues and we don't see support. And that's just the truth of it. You know, my business partner, Dan, he's currently at home this week cleaning up his home in Owhiro Bay, which has also been impacted by the floods. You know, so he needs to pay his mortgage. He's got expenses now. So this support is so integral for our business and all the other businesses around. And I encourage you to also look at the threshold of the 50% and look at reducing that, because ultimately we've come off the back of a couple of recessionary years, and losing 50% based off a recessionary year, that does not work. You know, like it does not work as a business, you know. So we're coming off the back of 2 tough years, and then to have this happen and not be able to receive some kind of financial support because there's a threshold in place of 50%. You know, our business, speaking on behalf of us, we're sort of in the realms of 40 to 50%. But if we miss out on this kind of funding, we will go under. Like, I won't have an income. I'll have to let go our staff, where there's 6 of us that will be unemployed. And that's just the truth of it.
Thanks, Hugh. Let's go to the next slide, please. Thank you for being willing to offer a grant to these businesses. It's necessary and it's urgent. We agree the purpose of the grant needs to be business viability. As Hugh said, there's some parameters that we think need to be adapted to work for our particular situation. The 50% revenue loss is too high a threshold. Businesses will not be able to continue if it's that high. Some of the businesses have already lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. A capped grant for a few of these businesses will not enable them to survive. So a capped grant in a few instances will not work. Comparing our situation with the Parliament occupation, where the City Council provided $1 million to 40 businesses for 23 days of occupation in Parliament, we're now at 90 days. We've probably still got another 90 to go, and the council's looking at providing a $150,000 grant. So it feels to us that the proportionality is a little bit out of kilter at the moment. We think the catchment zone that's been proposed needs to include some access road where businesses rely on people coming into and from the beach. And we think the criteria around having a 12-month minimum period doesn't work. We should be encouraging businesses who want to set up here to stay here, and we will support them. That's when they need the most help, not an arbitrary, you haven't been operating for 12 months, so we're not going to support you. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to fly into the next slide. It's not all doom and gloom. We like to bring good news. We're hardy on the south coast. So, as I mentioned, we estimated a loss of $3 million. Originally, the proposed grant was going to be $350,000, which is 10% of the loss, but it certainly would go a long way to helping these businesses. Last Friday, that was reduced to $150,000 because of the wider impact of the weather and other people that are suffering, but also because Wellington Water weren't willing to come to the party and provide some of that funding. I mentioned the $1 million funding that was provided for the Parliament occupation. I've got good news. When I heard this, I reached out to Charles Barker and said, look, we would love your support. He came back and said, we really want to support you. We understand you're hurting, but within our statement of intent, we are not able to support you. But what you can do is go back to council and say, we have underspent our budget. It's by millions of dollars they have underspent. You can ask council to reallocate money that was going to Wellington Water to go to the businesses that the failure of Wellington Water's asset has provided, has resulted in, so that those funds can be put to good use for the businesses that are struggling. So the good news is there is funding there. It just comes down to a will of the council to prioritise where that money needs to be given the situation at hand. Our ask today is the fund is brought back to the original suggested amount of $350,000 to help these businesses who need it. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you for suggesting the grant. Councillors, please support this grant. I'd like to raise an amendment from the floor that says that the council increases the support grant from $150,000 to $350,000 to better align with the documented scale of economic loss experienced by affected businesses, and that funding be sourced from within council allocations, including any identified with Wellington Water's underspend, given the impacts that arise from a failure of a council-controlled asset. Next slide.
Steve, I don't want to hurry you on Julie. I'm giving you extra time because of the muck around at the beginning, but do you have much?
Yeah, last one. This is it.
Okay, right.
Hey, thank you. We really do appreciate your support. The support needs to be about business viability, so it needs to be meaningful support. We think getting this fund to $350,000 will do that. And we know there's lots of plans for Lyell Bay. We want, as this Lyell Bay is developed in the future, it's a vibrant, really successful area. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Given the timing, I won't allow councillors to ask questions, but thank you for those points. Very well made. Thank you also, Hugh, for your presentation. And we'll take those factors into account when we come to that issue on the agenda. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, we'll turn to item 2.1 on the agenda, which is an oral update on the 20 April weather event and the response. And I think Liam Hodgetts and Prosser are going to give us that oral update. So I'll ask both to present.
Mayor, if you're okay, I'll stay in this seat and Liam will join. I think Moana Maki might also join for the presentation as well as we go through. Just looking to see whether we can drive the presentation on the screens. Liam's going to control from that end. But if I kick up with some introductory comments, see. The weather event on the 20th of April, I don't really need to tell you, was one of the most severe Wellington City has experienced since records were kept. Over that 48-hour window, the city saw rainfall totals that nearly tripled monthly averages. But that, I guess that really only tells part of the story as to what was a unique event about how this was geographically isolated for the most severe downpours, and we've heard some of those personal examples today. For example, as this graph shows, Liam's just found the extra, there we go. If you can see in that top right-hand corner of the screen, 77 millimetres of rainfall was recorded in a single hour at our gauge at Berrenpore Nursery, and we know the damage that was caused around that space. The suburbs of Berrenpore, Newtown, Island Bay, Vogeltown, Brooklyn, South Corey and Ohiro Bay experienced a dramatically more severe event than other parts of the city. Our data shows, next slide please. Our data shows that over 1,800 properties were impacted, with close to 700 experiencing flooding, heavy silt, debris or slip-related risks. Many people were forced to evacuate their homes at pace and lost some or all of their personal belongings. Most tragic, of course, of all was the death of Mr. Philip Sutton, and our thoughts go to his family, whose house was largely swept away by the flooding in South Karori with his vehicle. The emergency response, a regional state of emergency, was announced on the 20th of April, and over the past week, the Emergency Operations Centre has been leading our local response. For background to how emergency responses work and the different responsibilities in a local state of emergency like this, Emergency Operations Centre is set up with a controller to lead the response. The state of emergency enables local controllers to do things like order evacuations if needed, restrict access to roads, bridges, etc. Allows them to enter premises. It gives us established emergency assistance or welfare centres. The Council's primary role is to support and provide advice to the controller and to provide suitably trained staff to support the controller in the EOC. And the cost to the Council of the response will become clearer in coming days. To date, known costs accrued to around roughly $100,000, in addition to the $100,000 that have been contributed to the Mayoral Relief Fund. We'll perhaps hear a little bit more about that from the Mayor in a minute or two. As Chief Executive, I have emergency powers to incur expenditure of up to $1 million, and I'll keep the Mayor and elected members and Pauiwi updated on spend, as some of that won't be known until a later date. for example, the waste offer that we put in place rapidly over the weekend, the final cost will be based on the tonnages of waste that are actually collected. So it's only an estimate. So that figure might change. That $1 million might be exceeded, might not be, but I'll report to you as I can and seek permission where necessary and appropriate. I'm going to hand over to Liam Hodgetts, who's our Chief Planning Officer by day, but also the Chair of the Crisis Management Team, CMT, for emergency events, who is coordinating between the EAC, the EOC and the City Council services. Liam.
Thank you, Matt. Kia ora, councillors. Yes, councillors, so I'm the Chair of the Crisis Management Team at Wellington City Council, and to my left here is Moana Mackie, who was the Deputy Controller during the event at the Emergency Operations Centre on Murphy Street. And just a quick word about that relationship. The executive teams sit and meet when there is a crisis. They're called CMT and they meet regularly. Their role primarily is to support the EOC with staffing and resource costs, but also to manage the services that council normally deliver. So CMT is also making calls around things like, should our libraries stay open, should our pools stay open, do we have enough roading teams out there, and is there any surge support needed? And that's how that relationship works during the time of an emergency. Quick update in terms of where the response and recovery is at, and Moana and I are happy to answer further questions. But as you know, Whakamaru has been providing the response and support for all the community who have been impacted by the event, both in their homes and in their commercial properties. It will continue to operate until Friday, where we are looking to stand that down and stand up a recovery team. And our whakamaru will continue to provide support to these families. We've had over 60 households contact us and be engaged with whakamaru support. We have a number of people who are also supporting and seeking advice through the Mayoral Fund. Just as a sense of the search support we had from other agencies, we had Māori Wardens, the Ethnic Patrol, NZRT, Salvation Army, Red Cross, all assisting throughout the response at various stages and at various components of the response. Māori Wardens, for example, and Urban Liaisons assisted Duckworth Street residents on Monday on clean-up, and we're happy to announce today also Task Force Kiwi are now on ground in the city, also ready to support and assist with residences to clean up. The clean-up is obviously well underway. The council's supporting a number of free waste drop-off initiatives. Maranui was used as a skip drop-off site and general large rubbish drop-offs, but of course, well publicised, we were very involved in one-tonne bag drops. They're called gorilla bags. We've issued about 500 of those now to residents. We had 20 staff working over the weekend to deploy that, so our waste services could lean in and now help residents and support them in getting that material up to the landfill, and that was because we still had some active slips and concerns at the landfill, and we're trying to restrict access for that time. That is no longer the case, of course. Including that, we got some wind as well as rain, and so the Park Services team were very, very active in our reserves, shutting them down for a period of time while the wind warning was in place, but also involved very heavily in the clean-up, and that continues. As I said, the deactivation of the EOC will happen Friday, but of course we're standing up now a recovery response team. Sean Ordain will be leading that along with Michael Duandam. The CMT approved the diversion of resources and people into the recovery team. They'll be operating at a level 4 here. And again, that will continue the welfare response for all the residents. We have quite a bit of work ahead of us, as you heard today, this morning from the public submissions. Due to the localised nature of the event and the intensity of that rainfall, we've had a number of slips and damaged infrastructure assets, including, of course, water and the stormwater system. So they are all being assessed, they're all being analysed. I am trying to encourage the team to be as responsive as possible, but we are taking, of course, a priority some of those more dangerous slips that are still active or still being assessed. So I want to just quickly acknowledge the stress and anxiety that these residents are being put through. But with Wellington Water and with the city, we're trying to do our best to get on top of those priority slips and the properties that have been impacted more directly by some of the damage. I'm happy to pause there and take questions. I think unless...
Just from a emergency operations centre perspective, I really want to reinforce that the fact that we're standing down the response on Friday does not mean that this event is over. And for those impacted communities, this event is going to go on for days and weeks. So we move from response to recovery. That's just a statutory thing that we do. The recovery manager that's being stood up is actually a recovery controller. So that person will have access to powers the City Council does not have for at least the next 3 weeks, and that can be extended. We haven't done this before. We've tended to do recovery in BAU, and it has not worked for the impacted communities. So this team is a team of staff that will be taken out of their BAU roles. They will be dedicated full-time to recovery, to working with these communities, to meeting their needs as we go through the clean-up and the restoration of our communities. So it's a very different way of doing recovery. All the evidence we've had from councils that have done this it has worked very well, so we're very hopeful. But I really do want to impress upon you that we know that this event is not over. We are not going into BAU. Thank you.
Yeah, right. I think we might just finish the presentation and then we'll take questions.
Just go back one slide, Liam. So post-event investigations. So to date, our full focus obviously has been on the emergency response and moving into recovery, as Moana's just set out, and supporting impacted residents. But we're beginning to turn our mind to what happened, where it happened, and we'll be analysing the impacted properties and what the water did and why. And we've heard some of those things this morning, so we can learn any lessons for our future planning. That investigation will be a post-recovery action. We'll work with the Mayor's Office and all council members and POEW to gain their input to this, because that will be important. As we've heard this morning, residents reaching out to their local ward councillors is an important part of that process. So more details will follow in due course, and I think there is a proposal to come forward to formalise that. But perhaps if I could hand to the Mayor to finish off with a quick update on the Mayoral Relief Fund and then probably questions.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. So just in relation to the Mayoral Relief Fund, which we set up late last week, the council contributed $100,000 to that. At this point, as of 11 a.m. yesterday, a total of $256,106 had been received or pledged. That includes the $100,000 from the council. There are significant contributions from the Clare Foundation, $25,000, from Woolworths, who contributed $5,000, and from the T.G. McCarthy Trust, who have contributed $50,000. Our ongoing contributions are still being received, and we're still going to be continue to encourage people to do that. As I think acknowledged, so far 155 applications for relief from the fund have been received. They are being processed by the Wellington City Mission. Before I open up to questions to officers, can I just acknowledge to the work of council officers and council staff since last Monday. As Mayor, and I know other councillors, and I particularly note Councillor Foon and Councillor Abdurrahman, the level of support that we've had from council officers and council staff has been phenomenal, but actually just the effort put in by council staff, many of whom were taken off their regular jobs to be redeployed into the emergency response, the centre, but also just the work of getting out to households, providing support, standing up the flood-damaged rubbish collection has just been an amazing effort. I know has been very reassuring and received with gratitude by a lot of the affected households and businesses. So I just want to acknowledge to Matt, to you and to your team, just a huge thanks for the effort that has gone into that. We have Deputy Mayor Ben McNulty.
Kia ora, thank you for the update. I'm not sure, Liam or Matt, you can decide which is best to talk about. So, Liam, we had that conversation the other week about the ratio of trained staff within council so we can get more boots on the ground when these events happen in future. I know I think of people like Phil Becker, and I imagine his life is almost more in disaster recovery than his BAU these days. So I'm really just after what's the decision pathway to review and look at that for the council table so that we have more council staff trained to get out on the ground so we're talking to residents sooner when the next event occurs.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. So yes, I mean, there's no decision pathway because we're already activating and trying to update our ratios. There's no actual national ratio for what city councils should have trained staff in their midst. So we're taking a leaf out of Kapiti District Council. They're well known for a good, solid emergency management system and collection of trained staff. But certainly for surge support, as I shared with the councillors several weeks ago when we were having a briefing on emergency management prior to the event, we are well stood up to respond. We need further training and support on recovery over time. The burnout rates are quite high, as you can imagine, when you're doing 12-hour shifts. So, we really can only sustain ourselves in a recovery sense for a good 3 to 4 days, and then after that, we will be looking for support from neighbouring councils, etc. So we will improve that ratio over time. But as the Mayor, and I acknowledge his comments, the team responded really well. It was localised, it was tragic, we had a loss of life, but in that sense, the team have responded quite well to the event to date.
Thank you. Councillor Foon.
Yes, kia ora. In a similar vein, I just want to seek assurance that there will be a kind of like an impact report where I guess this information will be publicly available for future councils and other councils actually, both observing our response and systems that we put in place, but also costs.
Thank you, Councillor. I think that was foreshadowed by the Chief Executive's report, but also the amendment that I proposed to move encompasses that. You're absolutely right. We should record how we responded, what has happened, lessons that we've learned, and I know reflections that you and I have shared. There's plenty more we can think about how we would respond in the future. I should just add too, remembering that when the original state of emergency was called because of what happened in Wellington, it also followed the weather events that had preceded the previous week that mainly affected Porirua and Hutt City, and to some extent Upper Hutt as well. So the region was affected by a prolonged sort of bout of pretty fierce weather, particularly rainfall. So we got particularly badly hit last Monday, but there's always things to learn and from the response that we do, because things have to happen so quickly, and we only ever want to get better at doing this to the extent that we can. Councillor Abdelrahman.
Kia ora whanau. Thank you again for the support on the weekend to all of you. My question is, the impact was not only physical, and there are a lot of people who previously lost their job, now they lost their households, and some of them, they don't even have insurance. So is there any psychological support, whether from the central government? Is there any resources that we are aware of the central government is putting into to support those communities?
So there is central government support that the EOC is currently looking into, particularly around accommodation and financial support. The purpose of the recovery team and the recovery manager is to highlight what those needs are and then to respond to those needs. So that's what the recovery team is going to be able to do once they're fully stood up on Monday.
I should add too, the central government does have a kind of disaster relief funding. There's a maximum payment under that scheme of $100,000. We've applied for $100,000. We're waiting for a decision from government on that. Councillor Compton.
Thank you. I've got two questions. One regarding the team that are moving into the team that starts on Monday. Will those team members be backfilled in their permanent roles?
Yeah, I mean, that's for the organisation to... We were very careful in selecting the people, working with their managers to make sure that disruption to BAU was going to be minimised. So maybe not fully backfilled, but certainly as a council, we sometimes just have to prioritise things. So this is a prioritisation exercise.
Okay, thank you. My second question is there a view of officers that if council funded and had a stronger program of proactive asset management, that some of the damage might have been avoided?
I think it's probably too soon for us to assess that, Councillor Compton, but that'll be part of the process that we go through, and we can look at that matter.
Councillor Osborne.
Thank you. And just like everyone else, I reiterate the thanks to the staff who worked so tirelessly in the response. I just have a quick question, and I realise it's early days and more analysis will come, but obviously the council does quite a bit of flood hazard mapping around the city, and I'm just wondering if at a high level what occurred in this event reflected how we thought it would happen, I guess.
Through you, Your Worship, well, I don't think we could necessarily reflect exactly what happened given the extraordinary nature of the event, but certainly all the flow paths followed the overland flow zoning maps that we had in place, and a lot of these maps are already minted under the new district plan that council, certainly last training, was overseeing. So we've had all that hazard map updated, and it did generally follow all of those zoned overland flow paths.
Councillor Calvert.
Yeah, two questions. First one is Remo still involved in the recovery?
So the Emergency Operations Centre is still operating. The plan is that it will stand down at the end of the day on Friday, and then we move into recovery. So Remo are supporting that, but that regional state of emergency obviously was lifted last weekend. So Remo are certainly providing professional support to our Emergency Operations Centre, but at the moment it's been managed locally.
Okay.
Yeah, and just to add, I think we had an excellent update at CNT, I think on Sunday, from the regional recovery lead for Remo, and he was able to provide some really good guidance on what that recovery plan looks like.
Okay. And just my second question is, there's been communication out about, even though the weather event is over, to watch out for landslips. Has there been any reports or in terms of potential landslips?
Well, there's a number of slips being assessed at the moment, and we haven't got those engineering reports back yet. Those assessments are based on whether those slips are still active or not, and it's all about ground saturation. And as I mentioned earlier in my update, we are prioritising those slips based on risks to life and assets. So we'll be able to provide a more fulsome response back to councillors about what are active or not, and how we're going about addressing those slips in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, and if there's been any subsequent ones, because I know we know about the ones that we could see visually, but just
not to my knowledge, not since the rainfall event on Monday.
Okay, thank you.
Before we go to a second, any other questions? All right, Councillor Abdulrahman and then Councillor Compton.
This is about the insurance. Do we know the extent of damage to council on assets and what the insurance coverage looks like for that?
Kia ora, councillors. We're still collecting some of that information. There has been some damage to council-owned assets. We do have a self-insurance fund. Most of the damage is relatively minor in the grand scheme of things. We do have a self-insurance fund that will be able to cover most of those claims, and we'll be working through that. And we report on that fund to the Audit and Risk Committee, so we can give some visibility there.
Just to follow up on that then, for example, Wakefield Park, the facility seems to be impacted by the flood. And does that mean that goes through the insurance, the council's insurance, or they have to deal it in their own way? Because they are.
If it's a council-related asset, we will work through the most appropriate process within our own insurance stack, I guess we'd call it, and we'd work through that process.
Thank you.
Councillor Compton.
Thank you. Just in relation to the areas where there are slips, can I ask are they coned off? Are there warning signs? Is there something to advise the public to stay away?
Where it's on council land impacting reserves, yes.
Councillor Foon.
Yeah, two questions, thank you. I know I've put this in the Q&A, but I just want to understand the process around rates remissions and how we will manage that with a rough timeline going forward?
Chief Financial Officer Reeves will answer.
So we have a rates remission policy that does anticipate this kind of event happening. Within that policy, it states that where there is a significant event or a disaster, we will provide remissions. My team are working on quantifying that and bringing that to council. We're yet to work through that process. I would anticipate we would ratify that at the next council meeting, and we can have conversations. We may bring it to a committee meeting in advance to get that clarity for homeowners, but we will work through that process and bring advice to you.
Thank you. And second question, just to back up on Councillor Osborne and Mr Farrant's submission today, but just the flood paths, that was a surprise to many, and even myself when I decided to take a little look closer at where our home was. So I guess, is there, and you don't have to answer this today, but will there be an opportunity to help the communities around Wellington really know and understand where those plains flood paths are in the future?
Look, I'm aware in Auckland, in their recovery effort, there was a lot of community work done by officers of the recovery team who put together surveys to get a sense of matching what was impacted to the maps, of course, but also at the same time getting feedback from residents who had experienced unusual flooding or flooding they hadn't seen before. All of that goes back into our databases, cross-checked with our overland flow paths, but it's a really useful data to also elevate the acknowledgement and understanding of those residents, because often if you're a long-term resident and you've had such a rare event like this, you'll only ever know unless you pay attention to the district planning amendments or you get a land information memorandum for your property. So there will be an opportunity for us to raise awareness for sure. That's not... Again, learning from our lessons in Auckland, that's something we'll deploy.
Thank you. And Deputy Mayor McNulty.
Kia ora. Look, I know from previous experience when I had a minor slip in my property a few years ago, one of the problems that then comes is the immense backlog on geotech engineers across the city. You know, everyone's waiting for their engineers to get out and the time frames blow out. So whilst I guess there's very little we can do to influence or assist in that space, I'm just wanting to confirm if you've got a bit of an overview of how that backlog's looking like across the city, and if there's anything, whether it's in our consenting or procedures that we are able to do to just try and speed up or grease the wheels of those engineering processes and consents and things as they come through to get people to recovery faster.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. I think it's a good question, and it's something we're thinking about for recovery. You would have heard, certainly Councillor Foon has presented a couple of examples to me of residents with particular very acute issues around engineering and structural concerns that will require building and planning consents at some point in time. The recovery effort and the way we can manage those cases will be connected into the consenting teams, and we hope that way we can accelerate and not frustrate.
Councillor Calvert.
Yes, sorry, just a follow-up question, just on, and I'm conscious that we, in a few weeks' time, we're finalising our annual plan for budget for the next year. So is it, and whilst it will take some time for you to bring back a fulsome report, are officers considering that we need to put some more money in the budget for whatever services that we need to do around this work in the next 12 months?
Through you, Your Worship, I haven't turned my mind to that yet, Councillor. But I'm sure we'll obviously be doing that over the next week or two.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions at this point for officers? No, if there aren't, then I'll move the motion as it appears. And I understand it's going to be seconded by Councillor O'Brien. I'll just, we've heard the presentations and many of us experienced what happened last week, but So I want to thank officers for that. I thank officers for the report. As indicated, I think, as Moa has said, there is plenty more to go on this in terms of our response to this event and the impact of it. And so what's important is that we do record how we responded, things that we've learned as a consequence of that. I think I was very pleased with the way the council responded, but there's always things we can do better, and so we should record that. And then there's the longer term thing, also partly reflected in the amendment that Councillor Rogers is about to put, which is what do we need to do given the nature of weather events, given the nature of rainfall that is now happening, that will be happening for some considerable time, and are our streetscapes and the places where people live, are they resilient enough to cope with the future events as we expect them? So it's important that I think we continue the follow-up work and reflect on this event. Councillor O'Brien, did you want to say anything at this point?
Yeah, just want to echo the comments of the Mayor there, and thank all those involved in the response, and those that continue to be involved in the response. And yeah, just echo that it is important that we get a full picture of what happened and understand how we can respond better in the future.
Any other points about you, Councillor Rogers? Doing it? You mean? Put your amendment, yep.
Colleagues, I've put up this amendment, and it is largely surrounding some of the work that we are already doing in the space to minimise some of the risks around stormwater inundation. But one of the focuses that I think we should be really clear on when it comes to making decisions in the long-term plan about where we are making investments is making sure that we are making stormwater investments in the areas with the biggest risks. I think, we have heard that the most recent storm has been catastrophic for our communities. And it demonstrates not only the limitations on the stormwater system that we currently have, but the limitations of reticulated networks as a whole. There is no pipe big enough to take a deluge of 77 millimetres worth of rain. And so we need to be thinking about the other ways that our communities are able to be resilient to some of these increasingly frequent weather events. And I mean, we are already doing some of this work. It is happening in some of our renewals and upgrades program. The question is, are we investing in the right places? Are we making sure that the renewals and upgrades where we are choosing to do stormwater interventions are the places that are exposed to the most and largest risks? So this amendment really is making sure that we do have the information coming into the long-term plan. I don't think it's incompatible with the amendment that the Mayor has put up. I think it supports it quite well to make sure that we're not only learning about the immediate response to this event, but we're also incorporating those learnings into our upgrades and renewal program going forward. So I would appreciate your support for this amendment.
Yeah. Do you have a second for your amendment, Councillor Rogers? Councillor Fern? Very good. Any other debate at this point?
Have we got questions of officers on the amendment,
on the
please?
amendment, right. Do officers...
Because I've got some questions.
All right. Can we have an officer available to answer questions?
So there'll be a sort of an engineering and a climate change question here, since I've got Liam. Just from I know there was a recent pilot study done of the Island Bay Berrinpool catchment, and that report was put out at the beginning of this year. So how does that feed into something like this?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, we have an active adaptation pilot on the south coast in those particular suburbs, and they're getting ready to present the draft findings from that work, and includes the community input and the various focus groups that they have running alongside it. Coupled with that work, we also have the Blue Network Plan, which was a piece of work conducted, I think, 2 years ago now, that just gave a high-level sort of picture, if you like, or context setting for where opportunities might be for the city to adopt something similar to what Councillor Rogers is suggesting here with the recommendation. I think after the recent events, and as I've explained before, we are very much still in response and transitioning to recovery. We need to just pause a little and understand how that work on the South Coast can help inform the long-term plan process. And again, I suspect with this resolution there will be similar ideas and recommendations coming from officers for certain areas that might support a decision-making element for council in the long-term plan.
Okay. And given that we're going through our long-term plan now, also starting to, and looking at our infrastructure strategy, so really over the next few months is when we're going to have to start landing what sort of things we're going to have in our long-term plan. So do you, are you comfortable that officers have got the resources and capacity to be able to report back within the next few months on this?
Well, I think you're referring to the activity strategies. I understand we're still working to mint those. The opportunities here will be difficult in a short space of time, but certainly by the intent of that resolution, if council was to support it, we would be able to present some form of focus area or example within that time.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Chung.
Thanks very much. Some years ago in Europe, they had the same problem with flooding, with water sort of coming over the roads and areas where it couldn't run away. So what they developed was a porous material. Have we actually ever looked at any of those things that we can actually use to alleviate the amount of water that's coming down the roads in solid areas?
Yes, Councillor, that's we are. I think the best example is actually the Swan and Garrett development that the last council approved. You'll see just off Cuba Street, there's been a number of water sensitive urban design initiatives that have tried to capture rainwater, reduce the impact on the stormwater network that sits under the road, but at the same time also clean it. Another good example of some local urban design that is accommodating stormwater aspects.
Any other questions for officers? All right. If there isn't any debate on the... Councillor Fern.
Yeah, kia ora. I'll speak to the substantive at the same time.
Yes, please.
Kia ora. I do want to acknowledge Darren Young for coming in this morning, who's possibly representing hundreds of those who have been displaced. We've had a loss of life. And for those that have scrambled to save their and their children's lives, homes and livelihoods and families. I just want to acknowledge also that after a few triennium, or actually now I finally met the Paikawakawa stream, which I've never seen before, but I saw it in its velocity coming down the side of Balfour and Liardet Street, and possibly the worst nightmare for a councillor to see both of our catchments, Paikawakawa and Ōwhiro catchment, in full flood. I do want to thank the Mayor for the amendment. Also, I think it is really important that we look at this as a whole and then pass it on to next generations and other councils so that we can all learn as these events, as we are now aware, will be continuous. And I do want to thank officers so much on behalf of our communities for the waste system. It was incredible, and it really just let all the barriers for our communities down so that they could react quickly while the weather was fine and they had teams to be able to help. I do want to thank Councillor Rogers for the amendment. I think just on the ground, seeing what was around, nature-based solutions are so able to help us as we go forward. It was very clear that where in Ōwhiro Bay there had been regenerative planting, that possibly the school was saved from flooding, as opposed to Wakefield Park, which to me turned into Niagara Falls. So I think when we look at the way we can redesign, I understand it will be over time, but I do ask for your support in this amendment. And I think in the Sponge Cities report it says, can they help us survive more intense rainfall? And I think the word there for many after this week or the last 11 days will be survive, and the answer to that would be yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Foon. Any other contributions to the debate? All right, I will... Oh, Councillor Rogers, do you want to reply? Made your points? Yep. All right, I'll put the motion which has been moved and seconded. That's the first one. We've got Councillor Randall's vote. Oh, yeah. Yep, there we go. That's carried. And we put the substantive motion. Any rights of reply on that? Oh, Councillor McNulty.
Look, just a very quick contribution. I'm really appreciative of the report back that's in this paper. Something that I've observed, we sort of increasingly have a bit of a missing middle in our crisis response, and that is not to take away from the incredible work that is being done on the ground, but we have a REMO model that is really built for pure catastrophe, where communities are entirely disconnected from essential response, and we're seeing obviously these much more severe localised events and the increase of the frequency. We had a storm about 8 weeks ago that really came through the north last time, and most of the rest of the city was unscathed, but there were households that had no electricity for a week. Off the back of that, and families and young families that didn't have places to go. Darren this morning, with his harrowing experience, spoke about how emergency services were just simply unable to respond there. So that's a rich opportunity for us to learn, to get better and better. Again, it is not taking away from the ridiculous amount of good work that's been done on the ground by volunteers, by REMO, by council staff, but we want to continuously improve because this is a new normal, and every time we see these events, we're going to have to get better on that. So really just supportive of that report back and how we make sure that we have learnt and we've kind of closed that missing middle in the emergency response, because these localised catastrophes seem to just be increasing in severity and frequency. Thank you.
Any other contributions to the debate? Yes, Councillor Matthews.
Kia ora koutou. I just want to, in particular, single out the loss of life and express my deep condolences to the family and friends of Mr. Sutton, and just say how I think for all of us, the very saddest thing is when we lose people in these kind of events. And I want to particularly acknowledge and thank the police for their work in the recovery of Mr. Sutton. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Matthews, and I think that it reflects the sentiments of all councillors. Thank you for that. Is there any other contributions to the debate? I have no reply to make on it, so we'll put the amended substantive to a vote. Please now cast your vote. Thank you, councillors. There's just one other point I would add, and I think councillors who were with me last week, Councillor Fern and Councillor Abdulakman, as we heard actually from Darren's presentation this morning, we heard about many acts of what can only be described as heroism, neighbours helping neighbours, and at some point a little further down the track, I'd like to find a way to recognise those in the community who really took great risks to help their neighbours at that very challenging time. So I just want to foreshadow that, and I'll talk to colleagues about how we might recognise those, the Herculean efforts of people who went out to help at that time. I propose to take the morning tea break at the moment, so we'll take 15 minutes. We'll be back at 3 minutes past 11. because we had a long morning tea break. We're now at item 2.2, which is the Moa Point Business Support Grant, and I'll ask Ms. Anna Calver, Officer, to speak to the report.
Kia ora koutou. I'm just going to take the paper as read, and I'm joined by my colleague Rula Adwad, who looks after our Business Improvement Districts program to support any questions.
All right, councillors, we have any questions for Ms. Carver or Rula? No questions. All right, then I will move the motion. We now have some amendments to the motion that appear before you. And just explaining this in a discussion with the Chief Executive, I was advised that there is some additional funding that is available and can be used to top up the original $150,000. So we now have $250,000 available. $200,000 available. In addition to that, there is some flexibility in the application of the criteria on the advice of the Chief Executive and approval of the Mayor. So in the event there was an application that was just outside the criteria, or where there would be a manifest injustice, then there is scope to apply some flexibility. And then the third amended element is that the scheme be reviewed and reported back by the 31st of August on the impacts, and we'll see what happens as a consequence of that. So that's where the resolution is at. I'll move that. Is there a seconder? Councillor O'Brien. Yeah, I look. We know that it has been a challenging event for many businesses in Lyell Bay as a consequence of the failure of the sewage treatment plant, and particularly for those whose businesses are very much dependent on the surf, access to the surf and the beach, and that's diving and surfing businesses in particular, and some hospitality businesses also whose businesses rely on footfall and people going to the incredible beach that is Lyell Bay Beach on our south coast during summertime, and they have felt the consequences of that reduced turnout from people going to the beach. Many businesses have been able to maintain at least some revenue stream, but some their revenue has fallen dramatically. This is an acknowledgement, a kind of a without prejudice acknowledgement that the failure of this council facility has caused harm to some businesses who need some assistance to get through. And these are businesses that we want, to the best extent we can get them to be sustained throughout this challenging period. We want them in Wellington. We want them on that south coast. We know what an important spot the south coast is for various surf-related activities that people like to partake of. So this goes some way to provide some assistance. It's not as much as some would like, or nor as we would have wished to some weeks ago. There are some eligibility criteria. There's now some scope to apply those criteria flexibly, but also we'll get some advice on the effect and impact of grants from this particular fund. So on that basis, I commend it to councillors. Councillor O'Brien, did you wish to say anything at this point? Okay. Any other contributions to the debate? Councillor Osborne.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, as the Mayor's just said, and we've heard from Steve and Hugh earlier this morning, the catastrophic failure of the Moa Point plant has had a devastating impact on a small number of businesses on our south coast, in particular around the Lyell Bay area. There was no warning that this was going to happen. There was no possible way that businesses could know that the plant was going to fail so catastrophically. I want to acknowledge that through this process, what has been particularly heartening when I've been talking to businesses is how each and every one is really going out of their way to support their staff and keep their staff on board. It's really been a lovely thing to see. Look, I recognise that, of course, our council faces financial constraints, but I think given the novelty of this situation, I really do believe that providing support to impacted businesses is the right thing to do, and I'm very happy to support this paper. Just on a last note, I think it's really important that certainty around this recovery is really, really critical for these businesses. And I know we've been talking to Wellington Water a lot, and I know we keep hearing we're going to, in the next few weeks, we're going to hear a plan for how this recovery is going to work out. And this is a complicated and a complex system. I know it's not easy, but I do want to put on the record that I really want to see Wellington Water get that recovery plan out as soon as they can, so these businesses can start planning for this disruption and when it will end. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. I'll just echo the sentiment you make too about we've been told sort of any week now, any day now, we'll have the sort of confirmed remediation plan. We're still waiting to see that, but we're continuing to make sure that Wellington Water delivers on that, if only for the certainty of people who live in the region or the area. They need to know and have some certainty about that. Councillor Compton.
Thank you. So ordinarily my approach is not normally to provide corporate welfare. However, given no fault of their own, our communities are in a critical state. So this is a small gesture, more of goodwill. I will urge my colleagues to hear what our Lyell Bay businesses and KRL have said this morning about costs and the hurt that they are facing, particularly with rate increases. It's the same all over the city. We must ask ourselves at every line of cost, is it critical to keeping our city running or to keep costs capped? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And then, Councillor Tiefenbacher.
Yeah, I think I just want to mirror Johnny's comments earlier. I think the reality is in business, if you lose 10 or 20% of your turnover, certainly in the hospitality area and some of these other areas as well, you're pretty much bankrupt. Your 10% margin is your profitability. Once you hit below that, you're starting to lose money. So I think the importance of this is really to show our community that people who do pay a lot more rates than a lot of other people in the average person, we do care. And just because you're a business, it doesn't mean you're not actually a Wellingtonian who actually contributes a lot to our society. So I really do hope that everyone will support this wholeheartedly. I'm very thankful for the Mayor for actually pushing it through, and also the Chief Executive, obviously, for adding some extra cash. If we can get more off Wellington Water in the future, that would be amazing. If we can't, at least we're doing our best to show the business community that we do care. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Calvert.
Yes, look, I'm going to be supporting this, and I think it's useful to sort of have some sort of framework going forward, because it's not only in areas of disaster or accidents, but it's also in terms of projects that this council does and causes quite extreme disruption to certain parts of our community, whether businesses or that, and whether we should be factoring in some of those costs into our project costs. So we'll be supporting this, and I would particularly like KRL's slide on the increases that businesses have faced over the last 5 years in rates, water, and not just council rates, but Greater Wellington Regional Council rates, which I saw had risen far more than our rates. So I think but we need this going forward, especially when we start thinking about our annual plan and our long-term plan. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Chung.
Since being a council, I've always been aware of how much money we actually spend and how everything, there's a cost to everything. But I think that in this case, that more than the money, more than the fact that we're actually short of money, what comes above that is always the human life, the human tragedies that happen to them. So I will be supporting this and very, very pleased to do so.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other contributions to the debate? None. Councillor O'Brien, did you want to exercise a right of reply?
Thanks, Mayor. I'd just like to start by thanking Steve and his team for the hard work they've done representing Lyell Bay businesses and for organising the opportunity for us to go and meet with business owners and hear about those impacts firsthand. And I'd like to thank Hugh as well for coming in today and speaking. Like Councillor Compton, I will say that I'm generally uncomfortable with public funds being allocated like this, but as Councillor Osborne mentioned, I think it is important to understand that this is an exceptional circumstance. And as it states in the paper, this has been the failure of a critical piece of council infrastructure that has had a very localised impact on a small number of businesses. And these businesses rely on access to the marine environment and strong trading over the summer period. And in my view, there is a public good here for supporting these businesses to remain viable. These businesses help make Lyell Bay what it is, and they provide jobs for workers in the city. And I'm comfortable with the set of criteria here that makes it clear that this support is going to local businesses that need it, and we're targeting that support to those who are most impacted. And through the amendment as well, that we're providing some scope for flexibility as well. And I also want to acknowledge that, while this fund will provide some support, it won't on its own recoup those losses, and I want to encourage Wellingtonians as well to continue to support those Lyell Bay businesses through these winter months that we know will be challenging. So, yeah, really happy to support this and urge everyone else to support it today. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. I have nothing further to add, so pardon me, we'll put the motion. And the resolution is passed. Thank you very much. Now turn to item 2.3 on the agenda, and I think Mr. Coe and Ms. Chetwynd, officers, will introduce the report.
Kia ora Mayor, kia ora councillors. So I'm Jeffrey Coe, manager of the PMO. I'll just do a very brief introduction to the report. Largely take it as read. So this is a Q3 report providing visibility of our significant projects. It normally comes to the City Strategy and Delivery Committee, but I think it's come to the meeting today as a part of the load, and also has the benefit of a more timely report for you all. The report gives visibility of the status of the significant projects and a forum for elected members to ask questions of their performance. This quarter, we've included some commentary on the project classification system, as well as the training plan requirements in respect to project management, being areas of interest to elected members. You'll see in the covering report that the intention is for the report to evolve to meet the requirements of the training plan, particularly broadening the scope of projects for which committee will have visibility of beyond just significant projects. In terms of classification, I will just say that while we do use the classification ratings to help define which projects should be reported through to our executive team and to committee, it's not the primary purpose of classification. Classification core purpose is really around putting the appropriate level of governance and management controls over a project, whether that's the expected experience of the project manager, the level of governance, or the level of assurance that we expect to see over our projects. So because of this, the classification system is broader than cost alone. Its complexity and the risk profile of the project is also essential to sort of think about what the appropriate set of controls are that we should have running over our projects. So other than that, I'll take the report as read. I'm happy to answer questions, and we have our SROs available in the room today as well to answer questions on particular projects.
Thank you very much. Right. Councillor, any questions for officers? Yes, Councillor Calvert.
Yeah, I just wonder why, within the body of the report, there is a projected $127 million forecast overspend, and why that was not highlighted in the covering memo and as part of the recommendations.
It's a good point. I suppose it could have been. I think those overspends are in relation to known projects, the Golden Mile and Hut 2, which have highlighted their financial status within the report, and I think have both come to committee in the past to discuss what's going on there. But it's a good point. I'll look to see how that can be reflected in the overall recovery notes.
Okay, and just another question is just in terms of the budgets within the report, which is very about the process, very process orientated. But at what point does the leadership look at the scope and design of these projects to trade off where the overspends may be forecast to occur?
So through you, Mayor, the projects are governed in various guises, some by project governance boards and some by SROs and some by other means. I think the way the projects are governed is they're reported on every quarter, so the governance is getting a really good view of what's going on. The carry forwards process each year is a really good opportunity to make sure that we are making sure we've done what we said we're going to do on that project during the year, and we're putting a lot of scrutiny over what will be carried forward into next year's budget. That is probably the primary place where that's being considered. So that will probably be what I would comment on.
I see our CFO, because my question's coming from a very much a financial perspective.
So there is no ability for us as executives to make trade-offs within those budgets. Those budget decisions must come to committee or council to be approved. That's within the delegations and our financial delegations. So unless they're absolutely minor, but that sits within the chief executive's delegation, but that does not cover these projects because these by itself are significant enough to report separately.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Compton.
Thank you. So just in relation to the HUP2 program and the Q&A, we've identified a tranche 1 saving of 6.5 million, potentially a $17 million saving in tranche 3. I'm just wondering if officers could please help me understand a little bit more around this program and why those underspends wouldn't come back to council for us to make a decision on how we spend those underspends, given that the remainder of the program was actually done on a P95 basis.
Thank you, Councillor. So those underspends will need to come back via committee for decision. As explained by the Chief Infrastructure Officer, where we do have underspends and if we are proposing to carry those forwards, those are subject to decision by committee or council as part of the delegation. So that conversation will need to happen. We would anticipate that happening in the Q3 report that we will be bringing to you in the near future.
Sorry, just a supplementary on that. So if there is savings, and I'm not talking annual savings, I'm talking about full project savings. So it will come back to council to make a decision. I'm just wondering why the forecast doesn't represent what those savings are. I mean, we're talking $23 million, $23.5 million. The forecast isn't representing that.
So in terms, I don't have the particular report in front of me, but maybe if I outline the process. So in terms of the process itself, we're constantly revising all of the capital expenditure programs of work. We do that, we go through a formal process every quarter. That doesn't mean that the budget per se changes. It is the delegation that changes in terms of where we're proposing to spend that. Our budgets are set within the annual plan and the long-term plan, but those are simply the guardrails in which you have set us to work within. They are not the accurate budget figures because, as you know, that's a 10-year plan. We still need to bring business cases to you, so there needs to be separate monitoring of those individual projects within that framework.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Randall, who is online. Councillor.
Yes, good morning. I just wanted to ask about the organics processing project. The budget says it's on track, but it's red overall in terms of budget, and I just get the sense that it's actually the future operating costs that perhaps aren't coming together. Can officers please outline what the budget for the operating costs are and what the information they've got from suppliers says will be the possible operating costs should this go ahead, just to understand why it's red.
So through you, Chair. I think, Councillor, there's a great question. There's a comprehensive paper coming to you next week through the Strategy and Design Committee meeting, which is going to bring the full picture of the organics and the collections proposals to you in the context of the information Beth and I have shared with you about the financial sustainability of the waste model. And it will also bring to you the information around some of the challenges we're facing in the delivery of that project around costs that have come through from the recent tender process. And I respectfully, can I suggest that conversation is had next week when that full paper is in front of you, because there will be a lot of information for you to take in, and that will be a really good conversation for you to have together with all the information in front of you.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Yes, that's fine.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Deputy Mayor McNulty.
Kia ora. Question actually about how the ELT works through this report. If a high risk is identified within a project, I'm just going to pull out one here from Kandala Pool, for instance. How does the ELT work through that high risk? Does this stay in the owner of that project? Does it take to a wider conversation? Is it dependent on risk? But how are those conversations essentially had and formulated across the executive leadership of the organisation?
Thank you, Councillor. So these reports do come to ELT once a month. What we're looking for is issues and symptoms across the suite of projects to make sure that we are spotting things that we can address at an executive team level that might be occurring on a sort of systematic basis. The resolution of the issues does need to sit with the SRO, but it's really useful for the SRO to have that conversation with the ELT colleagues about how to resolve it and how we go about that. So it's really more of a wisdom of the group conversation that we have in working out how to resolve some of the barriers that might be in play.
Any other questions on that? Yeah, Councillor Tiefenbacher.
Hey, just on the Hub 2, I see that there's been a saving of $6.5 million on the $24.8 million that we've already spent, which is about a 26% saving. Do you know how much of that is attributable to the Granville Flats demolition?
That's quite detailed. Sorry, through you, Mayor. I'm just wondering, Yeston, have I got you online, or Mario? Not there. Councillor, if you don't mind, I might need to come back to you on that.
Okay, so I guess just as a follow-up on it, because at that rate, with the 23 houses that we've improved, we've had a saving of $280,000 per house, effectively.
Yeah.
If we're that far out in budgeting to fix up something, what are we doing to make sure that that's not going to happen for the rest of the 500 million? Because we're saying that we're going to spend 500 million, but we have a saving of 280,000 on one single house. I'm trying to understand how that's possible.
Okay.
We have an officer online, Mario, is it? And Yeston.
Perhaps if they're not there, I can come back to you on that, because there's a bit of detail there that I'm sorry I'm not across as
I just think it's quite. I mean, this is probably our biggest capital expenditure, and this is massive differences to what I would normally expect. Because my understanding is some of the properties we're doing up, we're spending $700,000 on our $800,000 property. So maybe you could give me what does the ELT do to oversee once the budget is approved for a project like Hub 2? That we're getting the best value in, and how do we as elected members see that reflected? And if there's savings to be had because we've made better choices, when do we see that money come back to us?
So on the first point, this particular program is overseen by a project board, which does most of the heavy lifting on the governance for this project. So the ELT sees the results the same as you're seeing, but the majority of the heavy lifting on governance and decisions like this comes through the board, which has got 2 independent members on it. So we get that great perspective from external. I think the comments about budget were answered earlier by the Chief Financial Officer, but and I'll follow up the more detailed questions on the Granville impact.
Go for it, yep.
Hi, Jenny, yes.
So is that you, Mario? Did you want to answer that previous question? We've got another one lined up. That's ready. That's all.
I think
Is anybody there? Perhaps Carl, Councillor Tiefenbach, you can ask your next question, and then we can come back to officers who are online to respond to anything.
Yeah. So my question would be then, okay, so there's a board that oversees the project. I get that. When do we see what that board is seeing? Because we don't get any of that information. So here we are approving budgets for things. We're expecting other people to make sure that that goes ahead. We're hearing that there's quite massive amounts and quite big differentials. But as a council, I don't feel we ever get back. How do we make sure that we're getting value for money when that's our responsibility to make sure we're getting value for money?
Yeah. So probably make 3 comments. You see the quarter report, so the information you're getting in front of you today. You see we do it once, I think 3 times a year. We've got planned for the Hub 2 to come and give you a workshop 4 times a year. Yeah. So they're scheduled into your timetable. So 4 times a year you'll get a more thorough kind of deep dive into what Hub 2 is doing and where it's going, and that's a good opportunity for some really good questioning. And the third point I'd make is we probably need to think a little bit more about what information you get in line with what you've asked for in the training plan around just better reporting, because there's a whole list of things in there. And I think Jeffrey was alluding in his paper to the fact that we're working through some of those things to make sure we can bring that information back more effectively for you.
Right. Councillor Compton.
Thank you. So just following on from Councillor Tiefenbacher, I guess the concerns I have are around the savings that look to be predicted on this program. Currently, we have $500 million set aside. It's impacting our debt headroom moving forward and what other things we can spend the money on. And we may need those savings for other immediate priorities, such as overspends on other projects or for emergency works. And so I'm wondering around whether there's an opportunity here for maybe a change in governance so that we could see and so that council can have the opportunities earlier to make decisions on what to do with those budgets.
I think I just need to have a think about that. I think it's a great point. Thank you. I haven't got an answer for you right now, Councillor, but we can take that away. Okay. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Thank you, Councillor too. It is an important point. Councillor Abdulrahman.
Jenny, on the sledge minimisation facility, the IPS commissioning complete today. Have you received it yet? Or if so, you got an opportunity to look at it?
Sure. So, Councillor, I think you're referring to the testing of the base plate metal. Is that's the testing you're referring to?
Not testing, and here it says IPS commissioning complete April 30. It's under the coming key milestone for the sledge minimization facility. So since today is April 30, I wonder if you have received that commissioning that you probably requested for.
Beth, are you online for this one? Do you have any comment on that? So I'm not quite sure where that is. I think Beth's there.
Kia ora, Councillor. Yes, without looking at the report, so please bear with me. My understanding is that report covers the scheduled program dates. We're currently behind those scheduled program dates, particularly given the Moa Point issues, and that means that commissioning has not yet started. We can't start commissioning until Moa Point is up and going, although we can start some commissioning activity.
So does that mean we need to amend that before we move the paper today, because that's what it says here?
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I think one of the things we need to work on is what the current program is versus what the likely program is, given the risks we're facing, and that's something we're working on with the project team to make sure we're getting really transparent information around that. At the moment, given I guess where everything is at with Wellington Water and Moa Point, and I think given the contractual arrangements in place, we need to be careful that about how we report that and how we talk about it, and that's one of the reasons it's being reported in that way.
Just to add to that, there is some really good collaboration going on at the moment between Wellington Water and the SMF plant in terms of the recovery timelines and working those things through. But the program is going to possibly need to be adjusted depending on what the recovery timeframe looks like from wine to water, which is what Beth's alluding to there. So some of those things, they are being worked through at the moment, and we need to adjust the program going forward once we've got the certainty from wine to water on the recovery timeframe. Key to that is when we get sludge, basically back off Moa Point treatment plant.
Councillor Chung, did you have a question?
Thanks very much. I'd like to ask, we have an increase in the number of red flagged projects. Is that because of the way we're actually looking at it now? Like, have we changed our methodology or our criteria in actually examining these projects at all?
No, we haven't. It's just a reflection of the state of the projects.
Any other questions for officers? I just had one, which is related to the Town Hall development project. It talks about practical completion in July. I'm assuming that includes the annex structure, which doesn't look very complete to me. And then also the gap between that practical completion and the expected readiness for use, which is not expected till early next year.
No, the practical completion of the annex will be in September. So the practical completion is primarily, it's important for our relationship with the builder and their contracts and their liabilities in terms, and our liabilities in terms of extension of time claims, etc. So we're driving the builder in this instance to get that done as soon as possible. It will be done ahead of the annex, and then the actual service enlivenment of the building, the process which the tenants and venues go through to actually liven it up and then get their first productions available to the public, then takes a few more months as well to put together, hence the time delay.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Roberts. That's very helpful. If there, Councillor Tiefenbacher.
Sorry, James, for you as well. Hey, so when the building is complete in July or September, do we then get the area opened up so that it's actually nice and, usable by the public, or do we have to wait until later to see that? When do we see the completion of the actual exterior groundworks?
So, Councillor, you're talking about the external groundworks,
yeah, the external
right?
groundworks.
Yeah, so as you know, if you go into the square at the moment, there's a temporary fencing up between the town hall and the square and the gallery, etc. So that will not come down until the annex has been completed. So basically that groundwork is aligned to the completion of the annex itself.
So we're talking September-ish?
Correct, yes.
Okay. If there are no other questions, then I will move the motion. Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Al-Rubai. Any debate on the motion to receive the information? If there isn't, I'll put the motion. Oh, there is? Yeah, Councillor Compton.
Thank you. During our induction on infrastructure, we were told that elected members were investors and to leave operational matters to officers. I raised concerns about this approach at the time, and I am advising that I will not be prepared to do that any longer. We are seeing time and time again that money is being spent in what the public deem frivolous ways. In the Q&A, it was noted that the underspend on the HUP 2 program of $23.5 million will not be returned as savings at this point, and that the program business case states that underspends could be retained or carried forward to manage risk. There is a proverb that says a job expands to fill the time available, and I believe a project expands to fill the budget granted. In my experience, it is far more prudent to keep elected members updated to the extent that they would make the decision as what to do with the underspends based on what elected members' priorities are, not officers. We are the ones accountable to ratepayers. If someone of my experience of over 20 years within infrastructure and construction is concerned in seeing red flags, then you should take notice. I am volunteering as tribute to be on all project boards to ensure governance is going down to the right level, to ensure the management of ratepayer money and that it is being spent appropriately. I am prepared to do that, and I'll ask elected members, are you? This is why I'm voting against the significant projects report, and I will continue to do so until we are involved at a greater level and have comfort money is being spent in a prudent manner. Thank you.
Councillor Calvert.
Thank you, Councillor Compton. And I do note that often project boards should have a customer, community member, and I think it's probably very appropriate for appropriately skilled elected members to sit on those boards. And look, just following on from my question about there was no recognition in the covering note that we were tracking at $127 million overspend. This is just not acceptable, especially where there was nothing in the overarching report about how we're going to deal with it. I couldn't see any commentary at an overall level about how we were looking at taking costs out of projects, how we were trying to put the affordability lens across these projects. Whilst we've got a budget, the budget should not be the targets. We need to look at how we can get better value for money. And this is what this term of council is all about. And we should start seeing that being reflected in the project management. I'm also hearing that a lot of each project is looking at its own project. At some point, we need to make sure that there is an overarching leadership around looking at all those projects and how we are containing costs, how we are looking, again, as I said, for value for money. So I think this report in particular does raise a concern for me about whether we've got the governance structure right in terms of this to ensure that this is happening. And so, like Councillor Compton, I'm not comfortable in just receiving information. We need to, because of what's in that report, we need to actually be quite firm about what happens next. So I, like Councillor Compton, will not be approving this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Tiefenbacken.
Yeah, I think the key for me is that we obviously have some structural issues within council at the moment where processes aren't exactly perfect. I think we all accept that. I don't think there's any way you can debate it really. For me, I look at it and I go, we get told you need $500 million to do something. We go, okay, that's what we believe is the right cost, but then it appears we don't have quite enough oversight to be able to actually see whether that's the reality or not. And when it changes, we're reliant on other people to actually oversee that. And I just think that's wrong when you're talking about such large sums. For me, we just need to be better at what we're doing overall. And I think the only way we do that is if we actually demand better results and we are actually holding people more to account. And I don't think we're doing that enough. So like these two, I will be also voting against it. It's a principle thing more than ever. I understand that we're trying to get better at what we're doing. I just don't think we're quite there yet. And I don't think at the moment the council is operating in a way that we should just be accepting it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Abdulrahman.
Kia ora whanau. I see where Councillor Compton is coming from, and when it comes to having a governance councillors in some of those significant projects, governance board is something that we should discuss, and we raised it a few times last triennium as well. And then going forward, I think it's a space for discussion. However, the notion that we don't have an oversight at this stage is not true. Example, next week, we will be discussing about the organic waste and other areas because of the costs blowout, and we will be making a decision based on officers' advice. On June 18, the Golden Mile review is coming back for a decision for this council before we spend a lot of money. And what that means is that's the kind of oversight this council taking a leadership on it. And some of the areas, it's not us. It is the circumstances that is pushing us towards that. The Hub 2 would be a good example. The $127 million Councillor Covered mentioned, actually it's only because of two projects. Those two projects, we are reviewing them. If we look at it in general, out of the 17 projects, yes, we're looking at a few of them to review. Those two contributed to that 127. The rest of them, yes, we expect to be much less, but 97% of the budget. So the notion that it's getting out of hand is not true at this stage. And also we inherited from previous council and correcting those things when such as significant projects are not really that easy. At this stage, all I want to say is yes to Councillor Compton's future looking and how we can improve the governance of those significant projects, how we can have councillors on them and to contribute in a better way, to have a better oversight. But at this stage, from what I see, we are doing some of those projects to be reviewed because of the financial significance of it. And I reject the notion that we are not having an oversight.
Any other contributions to the debate? Councillor Al-Rubai, do you want to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to talk Councillor Abdirahman's comment about the governance. I do agree with Councillor Compton around having a level of governance on these significant projects to ensure that the community can feel at ease that one of the councillors who has experience and has the community's voice reflected on that. So perhaps that is a conversation that we need to take forward. I do, however, also agree with Councillor Abdirahman on that it is our role ultimately to ask these hard questions when we've got so many opportunities that come through during the year, whether it's workshops, whether it's access to officers, to ensure that we do ask these questions and we do follow up. And I personally feel that the work has been done into taking some of our concerns into respect in this reporting, and agreed. The 127 million oversight or over budget is being looked at the moment, and this is why we've gone out to review these projects, to come back and make a conscious choice and a well-informed choice with some new information that we do have. So I will be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just make the comment, we are receiving information. This is what this is. I've received no amendments on anything about this. I take Councillor Compton's point about improved oversight, and I can make a personal commitment to go away and work with officers on how that might happen. It would have been useful to have had an appropriate amendment, but that hasn't happened. So on that basis, I'm now going to put the motion. All those in favour, press 1. Those against, press 2. And the motion is carried. Turn now to item 2.4, the 2026 review of the Traffic and Parking Bylaw 2021, and invite Mr. Kaufman and Mr. Lawson to speak to the report.
Good morning. What's in front of you is the Traffic and Parking Bylaw. After a review by officers, we're recommending that it go out for consultation. It's got a small number of changes in there. Most of those are small and technical changes. Reviews to the bylaws are required by legislation, so every 10 years you have to review them. If you have a new bylaw, however, you're required to review it after a 5-year period. The traffic and transport rules sat within a consolidated bylaw prior to 2021. We pulled them out and put them into a standalone bylaw, and as a consequence it's treated as a new bylaw, hence the requirement for a review after a 5-year period. The review was done internally with other business units. What the review found is that the bylaw is working as intended. There are some technical changes, there's some updates to wording to make it more clear, so on and so forth, but in essence it is working. Consultation is something we're recommending. At the end of the day, there are different pathways you can go down in terms of consultation, but the requirement for bylaws that are of significant interest to the community or have significant impact on the community are required to go out for consultation. Consider it's parking, we are making a recommendation that we're going out and using the special consultative procedure to do that consultation. So in essence, we're asking for a decision today. We'll be consulting for a period of a month, mid-May to mid-June. After that, there'll be some oral hearings if we have any submissions that request oral hearings, with adoption shortly after that. I'll take it as read and leave it there, but happy to take any questions that you may have.
Just the first question, Mr. Kaufman, is that in terms of the consultation over the revamped bylaws, as you've noted, most of them are technical changes, wording changes. I think the most substantive thing I saw was the thing about camper vans or freedom camping and a further restriction on that. Apart from that, I suppose that where I'm getting to is what extent of consultation do we need to engage in when the changes appear to be reasonably minor?
So that's all outlined in the legislation, and as I said, if the bylaws of significant interest to the community and or it has a significant impact on the community, there is a requirement to use the special consultative procedure under the legislation, which is that higher level of consultation. If it is doing very minor tweaks like little updates to reflect legislative changes in the new name of the Act, for instance, you could go ahead and just adopt it. Our recommendation simply being that we're going beyond just those minor editorial changes where we're actually going a little bit further than that, and simply because it's parking and we know that the community is quite interested in parking, that there is, in our view, a need to go out and have a conversation with the community. I do want to also point out that often, not often, but when we are challenged in terms of bylaws, it's often related to process, so a bit of belts and braces is actually useful.
Okay, thank you. A question from Councillor Randall.
Yes, thank you. First of all, breaching the bylaws will lead you to getting a parking ticket. I assume, say it's a parking bylaw. Is that correct? I mean, in other words, is the bylaw the reason that the ticket is issued?
So the bylaw gives you the rule, sets the framework for the rules. So it gives you the powers to set rules, and you set the rules through traffic resolutions.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I do note that while there are a number of changes that really align to the updated NTTA traffic road rules. There's a couple which I think are a bit more significant than others, such as the reduction from 7 days to 5 days for the amount of time you can leave a trailer on the road. Isn't that correct?
I believe that edit was made to align the dates with the dates in legislation, but we can certainly take, that will be out for consultation. We'll take feedback on that, and the decision will be made later when it's moved for adoption.
Thank you. I noticed one of the definitions is for an oversized vehicle, which says is a vehicle which doesn't fit into a standard park. When I asked what is the dimensions of a standard park, the officer said, well, there is no standard size for a park. So I'm just wondering, if councillors can and the public can still make further amendments to get further clarity on these sort of marginal issues.
Absolutely, we're open to receive feedback on anything that the public wants to raise with us.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Randall. Any other questions for officers? Yes, Councillor Chung.
Over the last few years, I've received a lot of comments back from residents who say that there's a lot of trailers at the side of the road with great big signs on them. So do we differentiate between those trailers at the side of the road that may be there for individual owners, and also these big advertising things that, because they say that they actually block the road, you can't see traffic coming ahead when you have these big signs. So do we have control in the bylaws about those?
The parking of trailers on the street is covered in legislation and within the bylaw. So an immobile a vehicle without motive power. So that is an issue which our parking team does monitor.
Go for it. Yep.
So is there a differentiation between, say, parking a trailer which is, sort of half metre high or something, and a trailer there that has a massive big 2 metre placard or sign on it advertising the local plumber or something?
I don't believe so, but I'd have to come back to you.
Thanks, because I think this is the problem, that with these big signs, drivers can't actually see around the corner. They can't see traffic coming, and that's I've been told that this causes accidents.
We can have a look at that and come back to you.
Councillor Young.
Are we standing anymore at council meetings, or have we abandoned that?
Sorry, what was the question?
At council meetings. I'm old-fashioned. We always stood at council meetings.
You're welcome to stand, sit, adopt any position you like.
So I actually just have a question.
As long as we can hear you is the critical thing.
Well, sometimes that's a disadvantage. Anyway, my question is, I live in an area with residence parking zones which are widespread across the Lambton ward. Is there any way of restricting, for example, a ute, a double-door ute with signage, which is owned by a resident, from parking in a resident's car park? Because they often take up 2 spaces, as most inner-city people drive quite small cars, and you get these very large signed utes, but the person lives nearby with a residence parking zone. Can we do anything about that?
We'll probably need a bit more information in terms of the specific site, but cars are supposed to be parking within one car park space rather than multiple car park spaces.
Yeah,
So,
I'll come back to you about that.
Yeah.
As long as we're complying with the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act, we'll be fine. Freedom of expression and all that sort of stuff. Any other questions for, which I understand is a principle governing the adoption of bylaws, we still have to be compliant. Any other questions for officers? No. Councillor Osborne, I understand you're keen to move the motion. Do we have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Liberty, thank you. Councillor Osborne.
Thanks. What a pleasure to move the paper. I appreciate that. Hey, look, I just want to first of all apologise to colleagues for the very last minute amendment. I've learnt some procedural lessons this week that I will implement in future weeks. So again, please accept my apologies. The amendment that I'm proposing, that, just for point of clarification, is that going into the substantive?
It's now.
Yes,
it
is. Thank you. Is really just these changes, as we've heard, are relatively minor and technical. And we've also already agreed to review the parking policy in our triennium plan. I just don't think we need to necessarily spend too much resources on a consultation process that may well give an indication that we're doing more than we actually are in this update. So that's really all the amendment speaks to. That's all I really need to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Liberty. Oh.
Question. Is that?
We've moved on from questions. We're now speaking to the resolution. Yeah. Councillor Liberty, no. Anybody else wish to contribute to the debate? Oh, Councillor Randall.
Yes, thank you very much. Look, I have to, I wasn't not aware that Councillor Osborne was able to move the substantive, his amendment as a substantive. And I was prepared to look at it, someone else moving the paper and him moving his suggestion to change the time period and regime under which the consultation will happen. Because of this, of course, that's meant that I've missed the opportunity to ask officers their view of whether or not this change will make a material difference to the consultation, which is quite unfortunate. So that's the reason why I was wanting to ask a question, which is a question I was going to raise when Councillor Osborne put the amendment as he outlined he was going to do.
Councillor Randall, I'm happy to recall the officers, either one of them or both, to answer your question. Mr. Kaufman is prepared to take
that would
the
just be
stand again.
helpful because obviously they chose the method of consultation for a good reason. I understand why the suggested change is possibly wasn't chosen given the extra effort.
All right. Mr. Kaufman.
Thank you. Happy to answer the question. So the special consultative procedure basically has three steps. So you have to adopt a statement of proposal, you have to consult for a month, and you have to have oral hearings. Working under Section 82 of the Act is slightly different. You're working to consultation principles. So there aren't a specific set of steps that you go through. And so you've got a little bit more leeway if you like. There is one principle in there. I mean, you still have to have a consultation document, of course. You still have to go out and have conversations with your community. It might not be a month. You could do something a little bit shorter. The main change, though, is there's no requirement to do necessarily oral hearings. There is a principle under Section 82 that talks to the fact that people should be allowed to provide feedback in a manner and format that suits their preferences. And that's a paraphrase, that's not exact wording. So you don't have to set up oral hearings, but if someone asks for it, in essence, you kind of have to do it. So I'll leave it there.
So given the officers recommended this is special, what was the reason the officers recommended this is done under a special consultative procedure versus the lower effort of the other procedure?
It just provides, so bylaws are done under the special consultative procedure if they meet that significant interest or significant impact threshold. Arguably, this one is a little bit lower because the changes are reasonably modest, but I would note that parking is of significant or reasonable interest to a lot of Wellingtonians. So that's why we've recommended the special consultative procedure. It is a bit belts and braces. You could certainly do it under Section 82 of the Act. But the difference isn't material in terms of cost or time or energy on staff. The reality is you might not do oral hearings at the end, so you'd be saving yourself a few hours in terms of work and potentially a bit of administrative costs and work in that space, but it isn't significantly different.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And because I reopened questions for Councillor Randall, I will allow Councillor Abdirahman to ask what question he was going to ask previously.
No, I promise I didn't send my question to Councillor Randall, but it was asked.
Right, okay. All right. We've now ended questions. I'm putting a line under it. That's it. No more questions. Do we have any more contributions to the debate? Following Councillor Young.
So I'll sit down now. So ever since I've been on council, there's been a very fraught issue over parking in Lambton. It is a big issue for the Lambton ward citizens. And there's one particular anomaly which I would really like the officers to look at, although I have been asking about it for the past 12 years. I live on Mount Victoria, which is one parking zone. It incorporates Oriental Bay and it goes right across to Patterson Street near the Haitatai Tunnel. Yet Thorndon is divided into 4 parking zones, which includes part of Kelburn. I have asked, begged, pleaded for this to be sorted out because if you live in Hobson Street, you can't park, for example, in parts of the shopping centre because that's not your zone. But if you live in Kelburn, you can, which is just nutty. So that is my first thing. The second thing is, as a lot of this in the papers is about shared path, I will once again implore the council to find some solution to the Oriental Bay shared path. There have already been some serious injuries, a broken hip included, because under the law, bicycles, which includes e-bikes, can go at the same speed as cars in the adjoining road. And you have pedestrians, you have young families with small children, you have people with dogs, and you have elderly people, often on, Zimmer frames or whatever, and they are at risk. The local residents association is deeply concerned. I know they have corresponded with you, Your Worship. We've had serious injuries. Please find a solution to it before someone is killed.
Thank you, Councillor. And you're right. I'm conscious of those and have raised it with officers. We do need to see some work done on the shared path and Oriental Parade. Are there any other contributions to the debate? There being none, Councillor Osborne, you exercise your right of reply. None. Councillor Liberty, no. Does anybody want to take any part of the report or anything separately? If not, I will put the resolution. Councillor Rogers is absent, and it's carried. A small modification for future meetings is going to be a monitor here somewhere, so I don't have to keep wringing my neck to go and check the result of the voting. Right, item number 2.5, decision register updates and upcoming reports. Are there any questions on this? Councillor Calvert.
The officers. Look, I'll talk from here. Just quick questions about, and it might be might not be editorial change, but just in the reports coming up on the 28th of May, I had assumed development contributions would be coming through to the Planning and Finance Committee first, in scope of the terms of reference, and also there's no noting of the annual plan coming to council either.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll check the process for the development contribution, certainly to make sure that goes through the appropriate process. And for the annual plan, that will clearly need to be signed off by the council for the forward program as part of the setting of the rates that will be in June when we come back. So if that's not included in the paper, that's our oversight.
I think it's more about the 28th of May when we approve the draft to go to audit. Does it not come to council on the 28th?
There is no need for it to go to council at that point in time.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on this? Yes, Councillor Osborne.
Can I just have a quick overview of what the paper, the local authority election considerations, just will cover?
My part is there.
Kia ora. So the council is required to look at its voting system, I believe, during this triennia, and that has been provisionally set for potentially being considered at the next meeting, but whether or not it is in fact something that's ready or necessary for the council to consider at that meeting is still being worked through.
Is Councillor Osborne's question, is this a statutory kind of routine thing, or is this?
Yes,
Yep.
statutory routine thing,
Yep.
and we just don't want it to drop off the program, but it's certainly not required by a deadline that would require consideration on the 28th.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Potter. Councillor Compton.
Sorry, just on that, if the paper was to be presented in approximately 4 weeks, and a week ahead of that is when it goes to essentially the chair's briefing, are officers working on this particular paper right now?
Yes, so this is a decision that's made every 3 years, and so in terms of working on that paper, there's a set of advice that comes up each time. And the other matter that also, as part of our council, we've considered in the past at the same time is order of ballot papers. That's a decision required ahead of the next triennial election.
So to be clear, officers have begun working on the paper, but there is still some work needed to complete it.
Councillor Compton, is that your question? Councillor Osborne, did you have a question?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. So this paper is really about the voting system that we use in our local elections. Do we undertake a review of the process of the elections in the same way that I understand central government does in sort of the 12 months following an election? Do we do something similar?
So we're not scheduled to do inquiry into the election the same way that some of the parliamentary committees do it, but there is a requirement for the council to complete a representation review. So that's what we'll be looking at doing, or looking at scheduling them for council.
So that's slightly different because that's about ward boundaries and things like that, right? We're not, so there's nothing on the work program for council to review how the election itself was run.
So we have been working on a voter turnout report. So there's one that was produced post the previous election, and so one is being prepared for this one also.
Is that
and that
so? That's different from what Parliament would do in terms of inquiring into the election.
And that voter turnout report will be shared with councillors?
Yeah, it'll be made publicly available.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for officers? If there are none, then I will move the motion. Is there a second for the motion? Councillor Abdulrahman. Any debate on the motion? There isn't. We'll put the motion. Right. That motion is carried. Now move to item number 3, committee reports, and we have a resolution to exclude the public because of content of the report back. I'll move the motion. Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Chung. Thank you. Any debate on that? The reasons are set out on the agenda. And we have, that item. And there is part of the resolution excluding the public is that Hugh Kettle, our legal advisor, external legal advisor, be permitted to remain in the meeting after the public has been excluded. Unless there's any debate, I'll put that resolution. All those in favour, press 1. Against, press 2. That's carried. We'll just now allow the public gallery to be cleared. Adjourn briefly to allow that to. We have a black rock. The closing karakia. Nuhi, ki te uri tapu nui, kia wātia, kia māmā, kia ngākau, te tinana, te waiurua, I te ara takatū, koia rā I rongo, whakaira ake ki runga, wātia, kia wātia, ai rā kua wātia. Kia ora, thank you all.